She walked in and froze, because there in her own living room, her 6-year-old son was kneeling on the cold marble floor, little hands raised like he'd practiced this before, eyes wide with fear, and the nanny she trusted more than anyone stood over him, hand frozen mid-swing. This wasn't some stranger breaking in. It was Mama Grace, the woman she paid to protect him, the one who braided his hair and sang lullabies at night. Jessica's scream ripped through the air. "What are you doing to my child?" And in that moment, every warm smile and every grateful payment turned to ash in her throat. Grace spun around, her mask snapping into place with practiced ease, babbling about homework and stubborn kids. But Jessica had already seen the truth in that split second before she was caught. The rage, the raised hand, the terror on her son's face. And the worst part was Kim didn't move. He stayed frozen, waiting, uncertain if it was even safe to run to his own mother. That's when Jessica understood the depth of her failure, that this hadn't been the first time. She pulled him into her arms, his small body trembling, and she felt the betrayal like a physical wound. Mama Grace had stolen not just his safety, but his ability to trust. When he whispered, "Am I bad, Mama?" Jessica's heart cracked open. No 6-year-old should ever wonder if abuse is their fault. Within minutes, the police arrived, sirens cutting through the quiet neighborhood. Detective Okoro walked in with eyes that had seen this too many times before, cataloging the overturned chair, the rice scattered on the floor, the small shoes flung aside in terror. Grace tried the sweet voice again, telling the officers she was just teaching discipline. But when the cuffs came out, her mask shattered, shrieking that the boy deserved it, that spoiled rich kids needed humility. The neighbors peered through their curtains as the predator was led away, leaving Jessica and Kim in the silence of a house that finally felt like a crime scene instead of a home. At the station, the facade crumbled further. Evidence stacked up, scratch marks inside a closet door, blood revealed by luminol, a notebook filled with chilling records of discipline sessions like experiments. Neighbors recalled hearing cries. Teachers remembered unexplained bruises. The pattern became undeniable. Okoro's voice cut through Grace's excuses. This wasn't discipline. This was torture, systematic and deliberate. And when the grainy security footage emerged, showing Grace towering over Kim in positions no one could mistake, the last pretenses collapsed. She confessed bits and pieces, grievances about wealthy families, resentments twisted into cruelty, but nothing could justify what she had done. And then came the revelation. She'd worked in other homes too, leaving trails of damaged children, families too ashamed or afraid to speak up. Jessica dreaded the call she had to make to Marcus, Kim's father. How do you tell a man his son has been living in terror? His silence on the other end turned into a guttural sound that was part rage, part grief. Within 20 minutes, he was at the house, scooping Kim up with trembling hands, whispering promises no father should ever have to make. For the first time since their divorce, Marcus and Jessica found themselves united by something bigger than their differences. They vowed to fight, not just for their son, but for every child Grace had hurt. And as the legal case unfolded, more families stepped forward, voices shaking but steady, each story echoing the same horror. The courtroom became more than a place of law. It was a stage for truth. Grace sat there, still trying to spin her lies, until her own notebook was read aloud. Lines about breaking children's spirits, about teaching them powerlessness. Parents wept, jurors flinched, and when the judge delivered a 15-year sentence, it was as if the entire room exhaled. But justice on paper didn't erase the scars. Nights were still haunted by Kim's flinches, by his whispered questions. Therapy sessions became their new normal, Marcus taking leave from work, Jessica shifting her career priorities, both of them learning to show up in ways they hadn't before. Slowly, laughter returned to their home. Slowly, trust rebuilt itself like fragile glass. And somewhere along the way, Jessica and Marcus rediscovered each other, not in some fairy tale reunion, but in the grit of shared responsibility and second chances. They realized presence mattered more than ambition, honesty more than pride. Out of that, something new began to form, not the old marriage patched up, but a partnership forged in fire. Then came the bigger twist, turning pain into purpose. They launched the Kim Foundation, a nonprofit built to protect children from hidden predators. With the help of Detective Okoro, they created real background checks, confidential reporting systems, therapy networks for families, and education programs teaching kids the difference between safe secrets and dangerous ones. Kim himself, now older and braver, became a voice for other children, telling classmates that adults aren't supposed to make them scared in their own homes. The foundation grew fast, helping hundreds of families, attracting attention from across West Africa. What started as one family's nightmare became a movement. And yet, as powerful as the victory was, Jessica often found herself staring at her son's smile, wondering how close she came to losing it forever. Healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant carrying the scars as reminders, using them to light the way for others. Some nights, she lay awake asking the question that haunts all parents. How many children are still suffering in silence, right now, while their parents trust the wrong smile? How many are too scared to speak up? And will we, as a society, choose justice or choose silence the next time? That's the question I'll leave you with. If this story struck you, share it. Talk about it. Because silence is what predators rely on, and truth is the only thing that breaks their power. So tell me, do you believe justice was truly served here? Or is this just the beginning of a fight much bigger than one nanny and one family? Marcus once told me something that stuck. He said justice isn't just about punishment. It's about making sure the same horror doesn't happen again. And you know what? He was right. Sending Grace to prison didn't erase Kim's trauma. It didn't rewind the nights he flinched from shadows, or the mornings Jessica had to coax him out of bed like he was walking into battle instead of school. Justice wasn't enough. Not for them. Not for the other families who stepped forward trembling but determined to speak their truth. That realization is what gave birth to something bigger, the Kim Foundation. Picture this: a room in Lagos, filled with parents, journalists, and child welfare advocates, the air heavy with anticipation. Jessica stood at the podium, voice steady but raw, admitting the one thing no parent ever wants to say, that she failed to protect her son. But she didn't say it with shame. She said it with fire, turning her guilt into fuel. Marcus followed, his construction workers' hands gripping policy documents instead of blueprints, laying out plans like he was building not skyscrapers, but safety nets for children. They weren't there as experts. They were there as survivors. And people listened, because you can't fake that kind of conviction. The foundation grew faster than they imagined. Background checks that went deeper than forged references, confidential reporting systems so families could raise alarms without fear of retaliation, therapy groups for kids and parents, even school programs teaching children about safe versus unsafe secrets. It was radical in its simplicity: empower kids, equip parents, and strip abusers of the shadows they rely on. And here's the twist: Kim himself became part of it. During one art therapy session, he drew a logo, 2 hands cradling a child. That sketch became the face of the foundation. Imagine that. An image born from a child's healing became the symbol of hope for thousands. But you can't build something like this without resistance. Some wealthy families didn't want their dirty laundry aired. Agencies that had turned blind eyes pushed back, worried about losing business. And let's be real, there were people who thought Jessica and Marcus were overreacting, making too much noise about discipline. That's where the story turns. Instead of folding, Marcus leaned in. He started calling out agencies by name, putting pressure in public forums, using every connection from his construction network to push the story beyond one courtroom. Jessica, the strategist, worked behind the scenes, turning whispers into headlines, making it impossible for anyone to dismiss what had happened as an isolated case. One night, about 6 months in, Marcus got a call from a father in Ghana. Same story, trusted nanny, bruises explained away, a child too scared to talk. That's when it hit him. This wasn't just Nigeria's problem, it was everywhere. Their tragedy had pulled the curtain back on a global issue. They began partnering with organizations across West Africa, exporting the model they'd built, training schools, even influencing policy. It wasn't glamorous, it was messy, it was exhausting. But every time a parent said, You saved my child. It gave them the fuel to keep going. Now, let me back up a sec, because while all this was happening publicly, something more fragile was happening privately. Jessica and Marcus, divorced, scarred, but suddenly working together every single day. At first, it was awkward. Every conversation careful, like walking on glass. But trauma has a way of stripping away pretense. Slowly, they started talking not just about court cases and foundation meetings, but about themselves. About what went wrong, about regrets, about second chances. And little by little, the bitterness melted into something softer. You could see it in small moments. Marcus fixing a leaky faucet without being asked, Jessica leaving coffee for him during late-night strategy sessions. For Kim, it felt like the world he'd lost was being pieced back together, not perfectly, but with seams that made it stronger. If there's a moment that stands out. Jessica told me about it later. Kim had a school project, building a papier-mâché volcano. He asked if Daddy could help, because Daddy knows construction stuff. That night, the three of them sat at the kitchen table, glue and paint everywhere, laughter filling a house that had once been silent with fear. And Jessica looked across the table and realized, this is what healing looks like. Not grand speeches, not courtroom victories, but a child laughing again while his parents share glue-stained hands. But let's not romanticize it too much. Healing wasn't linear. Kim had nightmares, sometimes weeks of regression. Jessica doubted herself constantly. Marcus wrestled with guilt that no father should carry. There were arguments, too, about work, about priorities, about whether they were moving too fast and rebuilding something fragile. But they kept showing up. And that's the difference. Abusers count on silence, on shame, on families collapsing under the weight of pain. Jessica and Marcus chose the harder road, turning that pain into action, even when it nearly broke them. Fast forward a year. The foundation is hosting its first gala at the Lagos Continental Hotel. The room glitters with chandeliers, but the weight of the event isn't in the decor, it's in the testimonies. Parents standing up, one by one, sharing how the foundation helped them uncover lies, how it gave their kids voices back. Journalists scribble notes, donors whisper, but the loudest voice in the room? Kim, 8 years old now, standing at the front with a confidence that once seemed impossible. I want other kids to know grown-ups shouldn't hurt them in their own houses, he says into the mic, his small voice carrying through the hall with more power than any adult could muster. And you could see grown men cry, because innocence, once shattered, rarely speaks with such clarity. Jessica watched from the side, tears streaming, realizing her son wasn't just surviving. He was leading. Marcus stood behind him, hands steady on his shoulders, anchoring him in a way he hadn't known how before. And in that moment, the story flipped again. This wasn't about grace anymore. It wasn't about punishment or even revenge. It was about legacy, about turning their nightmare into a shield for children they'd never meet. Now, I could end the story here, tie it up neatly with justice served and healing underway. But that wouldn't be honest, would it? Because the truth is, for every Kim who speaks out, there are countless kids still kneeling on marble floors, still raising small hands in silent defense while the world looks the other way. The foundation can't reach everyone. Laws don't always work fast enough. And trust me, predators still hide behind smiles in households across the globe. So here's the uncomfortable question this story leaves us with. Are we willing to see what's right in front of us? Are we willing to ask the hard questions before it's too late? Or will we keep pretending discipline and abuse are just blurry lines until another child breaks in silence? Yeah, that happened. It happened to Jessica, to Marcus, to Kim, and they turned it into something bigger than themselves. But what about us? When the next story breaks, when the next parent hesitates to speak, when the next child whispers, "Am I bad?" What will we do? That's where I leave it. Because some stories aren't meant to end neatly. Some stories are meant to stick, to haunt, to push us into uncomfortable conversations. So tell me, if it were your child, your home, your trust betrayed, would justice feel like enough? Or would you, like Jessica and Marcus, fight to turn your pain into protection for every child who can't yet speak for themselves?